Welcome everyone to the October edition of the Relapse Podcast. Steve here, and I have an awesome show lined up for you today. I'm going to get you started with a bunch of the late summer, fall releases we have that are brand new, upcoming, and I have an exclusive interview, very appropriate for Halloween time of the year. I have an interview with Matt Harvey, frontman of Exhumed, whose new album, Death Revenge, is out now. Also a member of Gruesome and Expulsion, tons of other projects, but I had a blast talking to him. We talked about Death Revenge. You'll find out a lot of that in depth a little later on. We talk about horror movies, something him and I mutually have very much in common. Talk about some of the mischief that Matt got into as a kid during the Halloween time of the year, and so much more. Coming up right now, we're gonna have a nice hard-hitting block of music. We have Iron Monkey's track OmegaMangler. This is off 913, which is the band's first album since coming back. It's been almost 2 decades in the making. Features 2 original members, J and S. This album has exceeded my expectations greatly, and I think you're gonna like it as well. After that, we have Integrity, Burning Beneath the Devil's Cross. The band just put out a contest where if you can perform Dom solo the best, post it up online, #Integrity Guitar Contest. You may win yourself a BC Rich Mockingbird. At Integrity, Incantation, so much more. Stay tuned. This is the Relapse Podcast. True classic you just heard right there. Overactive, Imagination, Reissue, Death. That's off Individual Thought Patterns, which in just a short amount of time, end of the month, the official vinyl repress will be available. A lot of people have been probably getting them in the mail by now, but if you haven't, stay tuned because you should be getting it shortly. Those vinyl went by extremely quickly, and I've been noticing on a lot of comments, people get upset because everybody loves Death. These vinyl reissues, the colors are beautiful, and they sell out so quickly. The next thing you know, you see them posted up on Discogs or eBay for an insane amount of money. So if you are interested in any future Death represses, you want to really find out what's going out as soon as it's available, you should sign up to the Relapse mail order. You can find out more about that at relapse.com. Highly suggested if you want to be one of the first to know what's going on with pre-orders and major news for the label. So we're going to keep moving on. This next block of music getting a little darker, getting a little more cynical. We have Atriarch, their track Repent. They're wrapping up a US tour right now for their new album Dead is Truth. After that, Poison Blood, a duo featuring Jenks Miller of Horseback and Neil Jameson of Krieg. The ironic thing about this band is they put out this awesome black metal stripped down EP. The two never met each other before, which I hope the day that does happen will mean we'll get a cool performance. I love this EP, and if you haven't heard it yet, you should go check it out for a fan of your old school, really first wave black metal. After that, we have Expulsion, supergroup featuring Matt Harvey, who I have an interview with later on this podcast. Also features Matt from Repulsion, got Danny from Phobia, and so many other acts entwined with that, and a lot more. So again, stay tuned. Right now, this is Atriarch, their new track, Repent. What you just heard was We Are The Gore by Haemorrhage here on the Relapse podcast. That's the title track off their recently and brand new album, appropriately, We Are The Gore. Awesome gore grind, one of my favorite personal grindcore bands growing up. So it's been an honor to be able to work with them and really get to see that, in my opinion, one of the best materials that they've released in their entire career. So awesome for that, Haemorrhage. Hope you get to make it out here to the States next year. They've already been confirmed for probably the greatest grind festival in the world, Obscene Extreme. So if you can make it over here, that'd be really cool from a US audience. Gonna switch it up right now from the grindcore to more of the electronic experimental things that are coming out later this fall. We have Steve Moore, who just recently finished up a score for the action and horror film Mayhem, which is awesome because it features Steve Ewan from The Walking Dead, and one of my favorite characters personally when watching it, so getting to get this little bit of connection is awesome to see. Just like his previous scores, whether it was Cub or The Mind's Eye from last year, super hypnotizing, really gets you into that horror trance, so definitely check it out. After the Steve Moore track, we have Cutthroat, a remix by Survive, which was taken from their Relapse debut full-length last year titled RR7349. If you're a fan of the band and wondering, like I was for a while, where they come up with these names, it is the label catalog number for the record. So keeping it simple, but keeping it effective and mysterious, just like Survive always does. This remix was done by Lena Willikins, super haunting, super eerie, and there's 3 other tracks on it, one of them in particular, remixed by Justin Broderick, better known for his work with the Godflesh, and going by the name JK Flesh for this little DJ remix. So I hope you enjoy. Again, coming up right now, this is Welcome to TSC by Steve Moore off his original score for Mayhem, featuring Steve Ewan of The Walking Dead. a remix of Survive's Cutthroat here on the Relapse podcast, done by Lena Willikins. That EP is out November 3rd worldwide, so stay tuned for that. We're going to switch up the gears once again. We're going to turn back the clocks because this is The Way She Fly by The Obsessed. Very excited to be working with this album. Of course, earlier in the year, got the pleasure of the first new Obsessed album, Sacred, in a long time. So Wino decided, you know what, let's go back, let's take the legendary self-titled debut album from the band, The Obsessed. We're going to reissue it, and it's the first time it's been on vinyl since that day. So incredible news. If you haven't gotten your hands on it, it comes with the highly sought-after Concrete Cancer EP from the band. Awesome package, beautiful vinyl color. And it also features a bunch of other goodies like an expanded artwork, new inside liners from Wino himself. Just a really cool thing to see. So yeah, it's going to be The Way She Fly by The Obsessed. Afterwards, it's going to be Cloakroom, their track Concrete Gallery. Their new album Time Well is out now. They just wrapped up their US tour supporting, and they have a bunch of new tour dates to be announced for 2018. Stay tuned for those. Got Primitive Man and so much more. Again, The Obsessed on the Relapse podcast. Pyrrhic Victory by Usnea here on the Relapse podcast. Off their third and new full-length, Portals into Futility. They're currently over in Europe, trekking through, supporting this album. Hopefully, they get to come back to the States, announce a few new tour dates. Got to see them at Psycho Las Vegas earlier in the summer, and just from the first and one performance I've seen from the band, been dying for more. Super hypnotic, just you get into that ethereal trance, I guess you could say, and no different when you listen to the full length. Before that was My Will by Primitive Man, the opening track from Caustic, and one of the most disgusting and utterly miserable albums I've ever heard, and if you haven't heard it yet, you need to hear it. As nihilistic and as just terrifying as the album is, that's what makes me want to come back to this band so much, because it's all this aggression. I never thought that for all the years of listening to music I would ever hear something of that magnitude. The trio of them are loud enough to make it seem like there's 9 guys on stage, but just 3 of them alone is plenty to make one of the loudest albums you will hear all year. And you should check them out when they come around. At the end of the month, they're going to be touring through the fall with Bellwitch. And just the thought of Bellwitch and Primitive Man touring together means you're going to have to buy about 3 different pairs of earplugs for that show, and you still might be walking out with tinnitus and permanent ear damage. Gonna be fun. Can't wait for that. So right now, it's time for my exclusive interview with Matt Harvey of Exhumed. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
We, that being Exhumed, have a brand new album out called Death Revenge. It's our 6th full length, and it's our first stab, pardon the pun there, at doing a completely conceptual record in the sort of like, Operation Mindcrime, Abigail, Dimension Hatros tradition. It is an actual story with characters and whatnot, based on the Burke-and-Hare murders that took place in the late 1820s in Edinburgh, Scotland. It's definitely the most kind of ambitious and elaborate record we've done so far. We're very stoked with how it came out, and hopefully folks dig it.
Now, Matt, can you give us a little in-depth behind the whole Death Revenge story?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. There's been several books written about it, but I'll try to keep it more to like the length of a novella here. Essentially, in the late 1820s in the United Kingdom and in Edinburgh in particular, the science of anatomy was very, again, pardon the pun here, cutting edge, and it was making a lot of strides. So it was, it was a very sought after profession, and there was a lot of research going into it. Of course, in order to study anatomy, one requires a cadaver, and that is kind of the issue that started the whole thing that led Burke-and-Hare to start killing people, was that there was a shortage of cadavers. The only legal way an anatomist could obtain one was by getting the body of a condemned criminal. And there was one particular anatomy school in Edinburgh, whose name is lost in the mist of my memory somewhere, that had a contract with the government to get all of those corpses, leaving all the other schools kind of high and dry. And so, as the supply and demand kind of works, when there's a demand and no supply, someone will step in to provide that. And there was a brisk underground trade in human bodies. There's a sort of rampant grave robbery, and to combat that, there was an industry of elaborate, locks and safes that you could put on your coffin and your mortuary and your mausoleum and so on and so forth. Enter a couple of migrant Irish workers who happened to be, basically like subletting rooms in their flat. One of the people renting the room for them happened to die. They took his body, sold it to an anatomist, and realized that they just made more money from one stiff than they could in a couple of months of work combined. So they decided that, and of course with the cadavers, the fresher the cadaver, the more valuable it was to the doctor. So they realized that the way they could obtain the freshest cadavers to sell was simply to start killing people. And that's what they did. And they sold the cadavers to a gentleman technically, a gentleman named Dr. Robert Knox, and the story of Death's Revenge revolves around William Burke, William Hare, the murderers, and Dr. Knox, the anatomist, who was their sort of patron. And there's murder, mayhem, drunken stupidity, dissection, grave robbery, and all the things that kind of have always made Exhumed. So when I read about it, I realized it was kind of the perfect thing for us to do a concept record about.
Now, Matt, in the narrative, there are 3 characters that are played by you, Ross, and Bud. How did you guys decide who would play who?
Well, we didn't use a casting director. Basically, Ross kind of enjoys the role of the heel, as they call it in wrestling. So he became William Hare, and in several popular, or not popular, but several, film adaptations of the story, William Hare is always sort of seen to be the bad influence on Burke. And they're like, come on, let's just kill people. Like, it doesn't matter. It's fine. And there's a whole song that it kind of encapsulates that, which is unspeakable. So Ross wanted the part of the heel. And not only does Hare convince Burke to start the murder spree, he also, when they're arrested, he also turns Crown's evidence and gets Burke hung while he manages to escape with his life, but very little of his liberty and or dignity. So Ross got the heel, as is his wont. And of course, Bud Burke, our guitar player, I mean, it would be sort of stupid if we didn't put him as William Burke, right? I mean, his name is Burke. So that just, was kind of a no-brainer right there. I ended up being Dr. Knox because, in terms of each character sort of has a very tragic flaw. With Hare, it's his greed and his bloodlust. With Burke, it's his sort of dull-witted, pliability. And with Dr. Knox, there's a real sort of arrogance there where he doesn't exactly know. It's not like they say, hey, we killed this guy, here's his body. But there's no other reasonable way that they could have gotten these specimens so fresh. And he just doesn't really care. He, to him, the end justifies the means. He's extremely arrogant and full of himself and happy to, sort of abet and facilitate the crimes of others while looking down on them as his inferiors and as sort of his servants, and looking down on the people he dissects as basically, better off being dead on his table than, living out their worthless lives in abject poverty. So as I'm sort of the, more like egocentric asshole, I'm more of an esoteric asshole, and Ross is more of like an in-your-face asshole. So it should have made sense for me to be Dr. Knox. And also Ross and Bud both have lower vocals, which puts them as Burke and Hare, that makes sense that they would be in a similar register. Dr. Knox, seeing himself as very separate, my vocals are in a higher register, so it sort of worked out on a number of levels.
Speaking of Ross, this is the first album with him back in the band. How has the process changed, and how has it made the band any different since then?
After we did Gore Metal, we were all pretty unhappy with how the record came out. And when we did Gore Metal the first time, we were all pretty, we were obviously 20 years younger at that point. And we all had a lot of interpersonal drama going on between us as, people, and also in our own individual lives. And so it was just a little bit untenable for us to keep working with Ross at that point, Although looking back on it, and Ross and I and Cole, our original drummer, we've all sort of like talked about this, and if we all were a little bit more mature and not a bunch of kids, we probably would have been able to sit down and be like, hey, like, this is what's going on, this is what you did that pissed me off, et cetera, and be able to listen and be like, yeah, that was also shitty of me, and probably had continued working together. But at the time, I was 23 or whatever, so I was a lot more of a dick back then. And at any rate, so we've had a long time to sort of do our own thing, and but to me, Ross is the exhumed voice, that I've always heard when I've been writing the material, even, after he was out of the band and stuff. It's like, oh, the low vocal will go here, and it's like, the voice in my head is Ross's. So when we re-recorded Gore Metal a few years ago, we started talking more. We were, friendly acquaintances again or whatever, but we started talking a lot more after that, and he came out and did some guest spots with us, and it was fun, and it was working well, and our bass player at the time quit the band, and it was like, well, fuck, now is the time to see if he'd be willing to come back on board. And we were very stoked to have him back. And, Ross he's a great editor. He's a great sounding board, and he's done a lot of concept records. So that was a big help to me, to just sort of bounce the ideas off him and send him lyrics and stuff. And Ross also is one of those guys that hates everything. So if he's like, yeah, it's pretty good, then it's past some very high standards, because he tends to just shred everything because he's maybe a little bit too smart for his own good, If he says it's pretty good, then it's probably really good. If he says it's like kind of bad, then it's probably okay, and it's you have to adjust. Yeah, it worked out really well. Assuming people actually like the record, once they get to hear it, I'm kind of have this feeling like, things have kind of lined up pretty well for this record, as far as the timing of it coming out and the performance of the band and the material and everything else. So hopefully people will dig it.
Now, on top of the new album release, you also just announced a headline tour for Death Revenge. Can you tell us a little bit about this package?
Yeah, we are going out starting November 15th for 3 weeks with our friends in Archaic. We've played with before on the Cannibal Corpse tour that we did a few years ago. So we're really stoked to do a headlining tour around the record, because obviously it's a concept album, and it's when you're playing for 30 minutes or whatever, it's kind of difficult to like put all that across, and also play the older songs that people have come to expect. So we're going to be able to do a lot more stuff on stage. We've been working out some new props and some new gags to do. We've been investing in some we got a new backdrop. We got a bunch of different shit that we'll be bringing with us on this tour. So it's going to be our attempt at a fairly elaborate production for us, which is we want to give people a really good show, and it's hard to do that when you're on a package tour. I mean, the Black Dahlia and Suffocation dates that we're doing are going to be really fun, but we're going to get up there in the middle of like a 5 or 6 band bill, play, and then leave, and we want to have time to really dig as deeply into the material as we'd like. So the headlining thing is going to give us an opportunity to do that. So if people like the record, this would be a good opportunity for them to come out and hear a lot of new stuff. And if, people aren't that familiar with it, we'll be able to play long enough to hit, some deep cuts and the songs that you always expect us to play as well.
How much off the new album are you expecting to play on the headline tour?
We are planning on playing at least half of it. And we've already been approached about playing the album straight through at some point. Yeah, it's one of those things where I kind of want to give it a little bit of time, because if we're doing a show like, hey, we're going to play this album straight through, and people are like, yeah, we don't like that album. But we want to let people, absorb the album a little bit and, see if there's a call to do that. And if there is, then that would be really fun and something that we've never done before, But we don't want to bore people, So we'll see. It's really up to the audience.
Moving back to Death Revenge quickly, how do you feel that these brutal murders and the Anatomy Act that came afterwards has really affected our modern views and practices for medicine, autopsies, and especially how widely accepted and practiced donating our body parts, organs, whatever it may be, has become?
I mean, I think it was definitely a really big turning point in the study of anatomy in terms of, certainly at least in the UK, and, the prevailing values weren't that different in America at the time either. So, it's kind of a sad thing that it took 16 people getting murdered to finally look at this and say, well, hey, we need a better system. I mean, unfortunately, that's usually what has to happen to advance things. Like something terrible has to happen, and people will open their eyes like, oh shit, we need to address this problem. But it did really go a long way towards starting to change people's attitudes towards dissection and towards autopsies and all of that stuff. It was a huge deal in Scotland and in England, and basically until Jack the Ripper came along, it was the crime of the century of the 19th century. So it was a very significant cultural moment. And one of the guys that was really big on observing on it and commenting on it was Sir Walter Scott, obviously very famous author. And he was writing into the local paper and stuff, and we've used some of his quotes about the case. So, I mean, it was something that really gripped the nation in a way like, Jeffrey Dahmer gripped America. But at least with the Burke and Hare murders, something positive came out of it. And the cause of science was finally able to be advanced a little bit. And, people were, kind of forced to reconsider some of their superstitious beliefs. I mean, obviously, I'm sure it didn't change overnight, but it was a step in the right direction, at least. So, I mean, in that, I guess there's a silver lining, I guess, to the story.
Dr. Knox, what is your favorite chapter in this tale we call Death Revenge?
It's kind of a cop-out, but I like the first cut the best. I like Defenders of the Grave. I just think it's the catchiest, but I like all the songs on the record, obviously, and I like all of them for different reasons. But I would go with Defenders of the Grave, which is why it was the first preview track. That was the hook, the guy Lucas Ruggieri that did the art for us. He knocked it out of the park, and he was really enthusiastic about the project, even when we ourselves were kind of stalling out. Like, we went through a whole, thing of renegotiating our contract with you guys and realigning our lineup, and then we had scheduling problems with, it would just seem like there was delay after delay after delay going on getting the record done. And Lucas was the one guy that was always checking in on me, like, hey, what's up? Like, are we doing this? Like, what's the timetable? And I was like, well, we don't have the budget yet, so I don't want to tell you to start drawing all this stuff because we can't pay you yet. And he's like, no, it's fine. Like, I'm working on the sketch. Like, what do you think? And his enthusiasm was just really an awesome thing that helped us stay focused. And the artwork that he came up with is just awesome. We were I was speaking with Lucas about the artwork, and we were going for the kind of vibe that was in the Bernie Wrightson Frankenstein graphic novel, where it's the novel of Frankenstein, but with Bernie Wrightson's illustrations kind of with each chapter. And, Lucas was a big fan of that, and I was a big fan of that. I think we kind of brought in some of that vibe. And hopefully, when people sit down with the record or the CD or whatever, they'll put the album on, and the idea is that you should be reading along with lyrics and looking at the picture and, sort of reading the story or whatever as the album is unfolding. And hopefully the pictures are just one more thing that helps to sort of draw you into the storyline. Doing this, the concept thing, the visual aspect becomes even more important than usual. It really is sort of a whole package where, I mean, the video that we did for Nightwork and the album cover and the illustrations and the score bits or whatever, that there's a lot of parts that had to be sort of cohesive. And we worked with a lot of different people this time around, with Orion doing the cover and Lucas doing the interior stuff and Jeff Sisson doing the video. It was really like a serious group effort. It wasn't just about, four guys with riffs or whatever. So that was a little bit of a bigger production challenge for us this time. But it's quite cool. I feel like it's pretty immersive if the listener chooses to wade all the way into those murky waters with us.
To start really getting into the festive Halloween spirit, Matt, what are some horror movies that you're just itching and dying to go home and watch right now?
I always like to go back and revisit all the classics that I grew up with. I mean, with new horror, it's I don't know. I find that I just don't get that exposed to it, and it's kind of rare that I find something that I really like. So I just keep returning to sort of the original well of inspiration. I'll probably watch Reanimator again for the 1 millionth time because it's just my favorite. Like I love it, and I'd start doing all the little stupid things like when Wes breaks his pencil and shit. That shit cracks me up. And it's a movie that I've lived with for so long, it just seems like second nature. I love rewatching the first two Hellraiser movies. I was such a big fan of those when I was a kid, and I think for like a 10-year-old, it was a very sort of eye-opening, the blurring of the line between pleasure and pain, and the sort of weird sadomasochistic vibe of the movies was a real, like, that really freaked me out when I was a kid, but it also just kind of like fascinated me, like, whoa, this is something I hadn't considered before. And From Beyond is kind of the same vibe again. Another movie that I love. One of the things that's great about a lot of these old movies is they also remind me of some of my favorite death metal songs, so it all goes together. And I'll always watch Evil Dead 2, like, anytime I get a chance, because it's just like a fucking fun, like a romp, And it has that. It was ironic before, like, irony was annoying, It was ironic 30 plus years ago, kind of being like, hey, we know horror can be cheesy, so we're just going to be cheesy with it. But we're also going to give you awesome gore effects, cool one-liners, and, everything.
You mentioned you don't get too much exposure to new horror movies, but are there any particular ones that you have watched and really enjoyed?
Well, the last horror movie I watched is I meant to go see it in theaters, but I think I was recording or I was somewhere, and then I just got busy, but I never saw The Witch, and I finally saw it. It's so good. Like, it's so moody, and, it just was really, I started kind of anticipating it a little bit, as the film went on, but it didn't matter because it just was such a great atmosphere throughout the whole movie. And the final scene was just like mind-blowing. I was like, I guess this isn't supposed to be a happy ending, but I was like, this is great. Like, this is perfect. She's like, fuck this boring ass life, chopping wood in the middle of nowhere with these dicks. Like, I'm gonna go be with the devil. So I thought that movie like really impressed the shit out of me. I thought that was really good. I saw Housebound a while ago. That was really fun. It's like a New Zealand movie about this chick that has to go live with her parents because she's on rehab, and then there's this sort of presence in the walls, and it's kind of eerie and weird, but it also kind of has a little bit of that humor, I mean, maybe just because Peter Jackson's from New Zealand, so maybe I just associate that whole country with that sort of fun vibe that he did on Bad Taste and Brain Dead. But I really enjoyed that movie. That was a lot of fun. The first time I saw a movie was in a theater. There was an art house theater that would show like 2 nights a week. They would have like foreign, like, martial arts movies or horror movies, and we used to go religiously. And we were really into like all those the John Woo, like, shoot 'em ups. This was like the early '90s, and then they would show weird horror movies, and we'd seen Bad Taste, and I think Beautiful Creatures was out by that point. But I knew there was this other movie and no video store had it or whatever. And so we went to see, it was, they built it as Dead Alive or whatever. And we went to see it in the theater, and we just walked out of there. It just was so beautifully gory, and it was so over the top that, it's almost like a Looney Tunes, it's cartoonish how incredibly gory and bloody it was. And it was so fucking funny, and I just thought that was one of the best horror movies I'd ever seen. There's the horror movies that had a sense of humor, like Brain Dead and like Evil Dead 2, and even Reanimator. There's definitely a sort of a joy to those movies and a fun that they're having with the tropes of the genre, and we're doing the same thing musically, you know. So I think a sense of humor is really important, especially when you're dealing with, you know, horrible, violent, disgusting stuff, because it's quite heavy, you know. It's really quite heavy subject matter, death and mortality and decay and all of that stuff. So I think that the best way to sort of handle it is to have a sense of humor about it, because, I mean, ultimately, you know, we're all going to fucking die. And none of this really matters anyway. You can work your whole life and get millions of bucks and you're still going to fucking die, or you can, you know, be a piece of shit and, you know, junkie who steals from their parents. But when you're dead, it doesn't matter anyway. Like, your life will all be erased and there's only nothingness. So you have to laugh, and it's a fucking cosmic joke, you know? I guess that's sort of an existentialist, but I mean, to me, it's like it's a very liberating philosophy, and it allows you to kind of like sit back and not take things as seriously and be able to laugh about it and feel that laughing about it is like it's an integral part of what we're doing, you know? There has to be some joy there as well.
All right, Matt, we're going to move into a little bit of a lightning round Halloween, October, fall question-related series to start things off. If you were to go trick-or-treating this year, what is the one candy you would have your eyes set on?
Anything like Reese's related. Yeah, I mean, just anything with peanut butter and chocolate, I'll eat until I die, until I like throw up.
What was the stupidest Halloween costume you ever wore?
I remember one year we were in high school and my friends wanted to go trick or treating, and I was like, dude, I'm 16. Like, I don't go trick or treating anymore. Like, I'm too old for this. Like, no, come on, we're all gonna go. And I was like, why don't I have a costume? It's Halloween night. And so I snuck into our old drummer Cole into his older sister's bedroom, and I stole her prom dress and just ended up wearing that. I mean, I borrowed it without asking. I returned it, you know, obviously. But yes, here we go.
That is definitely a story for the ages, Matt. Now, what would you say is the coolest costume you've ever worn?
You know, there was a couple of years ago, we were on tour for Halloween. We were out with Dying Fetus, and, you know, I love the Dying Fetus guys to death, but they're kind of just, they're pretty straightforward. Like, I was like, oh, you guys gonna do anything for Halloween? They're like, no, we're just gonna play a show. I was like, all right, well, we're gonna do something. So we all went to the Halloween store and like a couple of different Goodwills here and there for like a few days before. We put together, like, our Halloween costume was basically that we were a glam band. So we played most of the set, and then I think like Bud had a little guitar noodle kind of thing, whatever. We all ran backstage, changed real quick, and came out in like zebra spandex and bandanas and stuff. And I had this like dye, this like spray dye. I was trying to dye my hair blonde, but it didn't really work, and it just kind of fucked up my hair. But I thought it was quite cool. We came out and played like half of Shout at the Devil, and then like played the last song, and that was it. Yeah, you know, it's fun to do like you know, if you're playing a show on Halloween, I kind of feel like your band should dress up together as something, you know.
Next question, Matt. Have you ever gone TPing in your life?
Oh, dude, yeah, I used to do it all the time when I was a kid. When I was like 11 to 13, basically until I started playing guitar like a lot, I used to love TPing and just stupid vandalism and stuff. I remember there were some friends of mine, we used to do it, you know, like every few weekends at a slumber party. They always wanted to go and TP like a teacher's house or somebody's house, you know, for some particular reason. And I always was like, you know, what we're doing is really terrible, and you're kind of like trying to justify it because you think this person's bad. Like, we should just pick a random person and just enjoy being like shitty assholes. And we used to, you know, put bags of dog shit on people's porches and stuff. Well, I think they thought I took it too far one time because somebody's car window was open and I like pissed all over the inside of their car, and they're like, dude, that was pretty fucked up. I was like, we just vandalized someone's house. Like, who cares? And then, but yeah, I stopped doing that once I started playing guitar a lot because I just didn't want to get in trouble because my parents would let me play guitar.
Playing guitar keeps you off the streets and out of trouble.
That's totally true. Like, I actually really avoided getting in trouble in high school because we practiced in my dad's garage. And if I got in trouble or my grades slipped, we wouldn't be able to practice. So I was like, well, can't get in trouble now because this is what I want to be doing. So you just got to find the right motivator for your kids.
What is your opinion on pumpkin-flavored spiced coffees and beers and all the other pumpkin-flavored drinks?
I mean, I don't really like it personally. I mean, I don't get mad about it. It's just, you know, some people I see on face are like, fuck pumpkin spice, you basic white girls, whatever. I mean, to me, it's just not something that really interests me, you know. Especially like pumpkin spice beer. It's just, I don't know. It doesn't taste good at all. I just like beer, flavored beer.
Who do you think is the most overrated and most underrated horror movie character?
The most over and underrated horror movie character. Wow. Okay. I'm sort of tempted to say Freddy Krueger, but then I really liked Freddy when I was a little kid. I was super into Freddy. I liked his like little funny jokes and stuff. I kind of think Jason Voorhees might be the most overrated because the whole like weird thing with his mom and the little island and stuff. Like it kind of just seems like, you know, just like a cheesy take on the whole like, you know, Psycho / Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like weird, you know, mother fixated psychology. I can't even remember exactly what his whole story was. Yeah, I was never super into like slasher stuff. I was more like monsters and things like that. But I think he's kind of overrated. And just like putting a hockey mask on is like not really that cool of an outfit. So I'll go with Jason Voorhees as being the most overrated, most underrated. Yeah, because I mean, I'm trying to think of like a recognizable mascot that's, you know, been in multiple movies or whatever. I think maybe the tall man from Phantasm, like he gets some love, but I don't think he gets as much love maybe as he should get. Because that dude's fucking like frightening, and he doesn't really have much of a gimmick. He's just like this old, weird, tall dude that startles you. I think he's pretty fucking scary. If he's scary enough for Mortician, he's scary enough for me.
In your opinion, who is the true king or queen of Halloween?
True king or queen of Halloween? I mean, the queen has got to be Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. I mean, for me, I always really liked Morticia Addams, though. Like, I thought she was really hot, like the original one from the TV show, not Angelica Houston. But I thought she was really sexy. So I think, actually, I would say Morticia Addams would be the queen for me. And she's funny. She's spooky, beautiful, and funny. So that's, you know, everything that I'm looking for in a woman right there. So I would say she's the queen. I don't know about the king. I don't know.
All right, Matt. So I asked you to pick out 2 tracks off of Exhumed's new album, Death Revenge, and any 2 random tracks throughout Relapse discography. So what do you got for us?
So Defenders of the Grave is the first song on our new album, out now on Relapse Records, that you should totally buy, I guess, if you like this song. It was the first preview track and kind of the song that I pictured as being the hit single. So hopefully you dig it as well. Dead End is the third track on our new record, and it's kind of got a little bit of a mishmash of all of our various influences in there. You're going to hear a bit of Pestilence, a bit of Death, a bit of Carcass, and some very tasteful soloing by my good friend Bud Burke in this one. It's got a real like cool groove in the intro and the bridge that I really dig, and we're very stoked to be playing this one live in November when we go out and headline. Repulsion is my all-time favorite death metal and or grindcore band, whatever you want to call them. They're fucking great. I was fortunate enough to be their live guitar player for a few years, and they just had such a huge smile on my face every time they played this song. The first riff is just one of the ultimate gut-punching, like neck whip-lashing death metal riffs of all time. The slide just gives it that extra little bit of attitude, and love this song, like one of my absolute favorites. Numbskull was a band that our first guitar player, Daryl, introduced me to way back when we were in high school. And I love the record. It's aged really, really well. It's, basically a thrash record, but it's just on that slightly sort of death metal-ish edge. And Daryl he was a bit of a character. And he always would just make up these dumb fucking rhymes for everything or whatever. And we used to listen to this song. I just remember sitting around his house drinking 40 ounces of Old English. He'd be like, off with your noggin. Soon you'll be jogging. The blood is so gobbin. Off with your noggin. And we would always get a laugh out of that. So hopefully you'll think of that when you hear this song and think, God, those guys are fucking idiots. But great song, though.
Thank you so much for sharing all those songs with us, Matt. And do you have any final words for those who are still listening to us ramble on?
I would say thank you for listening, and thank you for checking out some of the songs for the record. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. We hope to see as many of you as possible when we go out there on tour. And we'll grab a beer and talk about metal. It'll be awesome.